Here's your prediction of the week. Florida's beating Miami.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, which is in full swing. We've got a bunch of games tonight. We're talking about one that happens on Saturday, one of the biggest of the week. We'll talk North Carolina a little bit later, and I watched the Connor Stalions documentary. Who doesn't want to talk about that? Let's talk about 5 Hour Energy, though. They're bringing you today's show. Fix Tired Fast. With zero sugar, convenient, portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Go to 5hourenergy.com, promo code LOCKEDONCFB to get 20% off your order. Offer only valid till September 30th. On one order, cannot be used with other promotions. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. That is Brandon Olson, Locked On Gators, joining me here on the show. And when I predicted Miami's preseason schedule, and they are my pick to win the ACC this year as well, I think they'll end up at 11-2 once they win the ACC championship game. A 10-2 regular season. I think they're dropping this week 1 game against Florida, Brandon. Here's my thinking, and I'm sure Miami fans will love to hear all of this. I am nothing if not consistent, and Florida has more continuity and home field advantage than Miami because they are at home, and you have a returning quarterback in Graham Mertz who's better than you think, and I like their receiving core, and I think they have a good roster. They're not going to have a great record this year, but they're not a bad team, and the less than 3-point spread is reflective of that, and I think that the Swamp is an incredibly difficult place to play, and I've seen teams over the last couple of years that go on to have better seasons than Florida each of the last 2 years go into the Swamp and lose, Brandon. I think Miami is going to be the latest.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I hope you know that from the moment you started with your prediction is that Florida is going to win, a bunch of Miami fans went into your comment section and started insulting the way you look and probably insulted the way I look because they can't talk.
The face insults, I'm used to those at this point.
Yeah.
They bounce off, so it's all good.
That's nothing. If you can't talk ball, you go for insults. I get it, Miami fans. It's your entire fan base, basically. I agree with you, though. I think continuity is a big factor in this. I think not just going into the Swamp. Going into the Swamp is hard enough as it is, but going into the Swamp with new starters at multiple key positions, the helmet communication, Lord knows how that's going to go early on. I think it's a massive advantage. I do think that these teams are way closer than either side gives them credit for. I think Florida fans underestimate Miami. I think Miami fans are underestimating Florida right now. And that quarterback continuity is huge. Look, game 1 for Cam Ward, game 12 for Graham Mertz because he missed a game last year. He's got more experience. He's got a year and a half in this system. It matters, especially in week 1. I've been saying all offseason, if this game's week 8, I'm leaning more towards Miami. But
I would too. I absolutely would too. I feel the same way.
Yep, that's exactly my take. It's week 1, though. It's really tough. Florida hasn't lost a home opener in 33 years, so going to be a little bit tough there.
So the other thing, in addition to the quarterback continuity there, and I like Cam Ward. I think he is absolutely capable of getting himself to New York City by the end of the year as a Heisman Trophy contender. I think their backfield with Damian Martinez is really good. Their offensive line, their roster, they are my pick to win the ACC for a reason. But last year, you had Tennessee go into Gainesville and lose 29-16. And guess what? Tennessee had the better season. And the year before, you had Utah go into Gainesville and lose. And this is the same coaching staff. It's Billy Napier and the Gators. I think they're better than they were last year. Their record just isn't going to reflect that. And so you think about, if you're a Miami fan, think about Florida as a 4-8, 5-7 team. That's incredibly reasonable. I think they probably wind up at 5-7. Maybe they could even get to 6-6 if they beat Florida State last week of the regular season. But if you're a Miami fan, you shouldn't look at Florida and think of them like that. Look at them and think of going to play a Virginia Tech, an NC State, one of those kind of next tier teams in the ACC, maybe not in the top 3, but in that next tier, because if Florida were in the ACC, Brandon, that's probably where they'd be.
I mean, hey, you look at the team composite rankings, the talent composite rankings, Florida's technically ranking-wise the highest or the most talented team in the state of Florida right now. They're 12th, FSU's 13th, Miami's 14th in the nation. Florida's up
Does
there.
Does it actually go 12, 13, 14 like that? Oh, the irony.
14, right? That's what I'm saying. And Florida's at the top there, which I know you've mentioned the record, really tough schedule. Miami right now, 5th, 6th toughest team on the schedule for the Florida Gators. They're running the gauntlet this year. I do think that this game is a very winnable one. Like I've said, you're home. It's week 1. Cam Ward's first game. I understand he's played in an air raid his entire college career. I understand he's got really good weapons. I understand he's got a really good offensive line. Week 1, we've seen crazy things happen. We know teams need time to gel. I don't care how much you've practiced. You need time to gel in actual game situations. And this is maybe the toughest game situation, one of the toughest atmospheres in the entire country. I've said I think the Swamp is a top 2 atmosphere in college football with Death Valley. That's it. So I think that taking a Miami team with a lot of new players, a lot of new communication. You need to communicate on the secondary, too. The crowd's going to be loud at times. It's going to be a little tough to go in there and win that game against Gainesville.
Let's talk about a couple of actual keys in this game beyond the generic. Win the turnover battle. Be good on third down. Like, you can apply that to almost any football game. But when you look at this Florida-Miami matchup, what are the 2 things, or if there's just one thing you look at and say, Florida has to do this, or they have to have an advantage here if they're going to win the game?
I think their pass protection really needs to hold up. This is a vaunted Miami defensive line. I've said, like, Ruben Bain, no doubt in my mind, great pass rusher, great player there. I need to see the rest of them step up and perform. I've said this before, like Tyler Barron, I understand they were really excited for him. Mesidor struggled to stay healthy, and Tyler Barron, completely unproductive in his entire career against Florida, was a ghost last year when they played. I just need to see the guys step out there and actually perform, but keeping Graham clean, one of the most important things. Give you time to attack an untested secondary. I think you have to win there. I think keeping in Hayden Hansen and pass protection is going to be a key part in that. And I will say, actually coming up and making tackles defensively is something that Florida's put an added emphasis on. They were one of the worst tackling teams in the Power 4 level last year. 4 of their top 5 missed tackle leaders are gone. Now they've brought in Asa Turner from Washington, who may not be the most athletic guy, but he's very technically sound. Pop Howard, all high praises from him this spring and camp. I think that it's vitally important to just not allow these big explosive plays on the ground, especially with Damian Martinez and an offensive line that's going to be looking to go downhill all game.
Final score prediction here, Brandon. I'll start 27-23. Gators get the win.
I was going to say 27-24 Gators.
Oh,
so we're
just absolutely dialed in. By the way, that could be horrible news for Florida fans. The last time on this show, score predictions were that close. Brian Smith and I both had Florida State 34-21 over Georgia Tech, and we all remember how that game went. That's why you play the games on the field. Brandon Olson, Locked On Gators. Brandon, appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Is North Carolina going to prove me wrong? I saw something that made me go, wait, what? What? Yeah, that's just coming up next. First, a reminder that this episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Are you tired after lunch? You're not alone. And 5 Hour Energy is going to be that pick you up that you need after lunch, because research shows that over 70% of us hit that wall after lunch. Let a 5 Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. 5 Hour Energy shots give you the feeling of alertness and energy you need to get in the zone. 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic day. And believe me, I've got a lot of these. This is the perfect sort of product. Stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5, hourenergy.com, get some 5 Hour Energy product today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to get 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order, cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. 5hourenergy.com today. Go check them out. So there's been kind of a shocking development in the North Carolina-Minnesota game, which, for those who are not aware, is the only Power 4 matchup happening today, that being Thursday, of course, as in it's the only matchup between a couple of Power 4 teams, hence why I am so intrigued by it, because these are two programs I don't have big expectations for, but I don't have the lowest expectations for. I could see one of these teams bottoming out. I could see one of them rising closer to the top of the conference than we'd expect. I could see both of them staying smack dab in the middle. They're kind of mystery teams. They're not chaos teams like UCF and Iowa State and Big 12, for instance, but they're definitely mystery teams at some level for a couple of reasons. And the shocking development that I alluded to is that the betting line moved by 4 points. 4, not 1, not 2, which is how many titles the Heatles won, not 3, not 4. Oh, wait, yeah, no, 4. You just don't see that sort of movement. That's a dramatic shift. So it was Minnesota minus 2.5, according to our friends at FanDuel, and now it is Minnesota plus 1.5. That gives me pause. I'm sticking with the Golden Gophers here because they're at home. This should be a really fun, competitive football game for anyone who just wants a college football game to throw on that's going to be fun, competitive, get the juices flowing, serve as a secondary teaser for this upcoming Saturday when you have a great lineup with Florida, Miami, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, and Clemson, Georgia on the docket. This is a great game for that. So last year when these teams met in Chapel Hill, it was a North Carolina win, 31-13. Last year was actually Minnesota's first losing season since 2017. That's part of the reason I have faith in the Gophers' ability to get off to a strong start here. Though Mack Brown coached North Carolina teams historically have started strong. And if they win this game, they'd prove me wrong because I'm picking Minnesota to win. And if they win more than 7 games, they'd prove me wrong again because that's how many I think North Carolina are winning this year. I'm very down on the Tar Heels. I think they, honestly, their schedule's pretty favorable, so it might be hard to do this because they do have some really good players. Marion Hampton is a really, really good running back, and they're going to lean on him a lot this year. I could see them missing a bowl game. I could. It's not the least likely thing in the world. But when they took on Minnesota last year, the difference came at the quarterback position, which I'll get to later in the game. 31-13 was the final. Drake May went for, drumroll please, 414 yards. I'm going to make the most solid, accurate, specific, cannot miss prediction in this game as far as stats and numbers go. There will not be a 400-yard passer in this game. Both teams are undergoing changes at the quarterback position from a season ago. That is a bad thing for North Carolina, and that is a great thing for Minnesota because last year, the Golden Gophers, let's just say they didn't throw the football very well. They still ended up 6-7 by the time they won their bowl game because they got in at 5-7. That happens every now and then. Minnesota did it last year, 6-7 year. Can they build on that? Yeah, they have a decent core returners on both sides of the ball, headlined by the running back Darius Taylor, who might not play in this game. He might play in this game. That's a big factor because you've got Marion Hampton on the other side. North Carolina is going to come out and run the ball. Now, Minnesota kept him in check in the matchup last year, held him to under 50 yards rushing, but that's because Drake May was going crazy. So they didn't need a Marion Hampton to have the sort of day that he's capable of, a 100 to 200 yard effort. And Minnesota's rush defense overall last season really, really struggled. So I think that for Minnesota in this game, if they can contain Marion Hampton, that plays to their benefit. The same exact equation goes for North Carolina. If you get Darius Taylor playing in this game, then guess what? You got to keep him under control. He averaged almost 6 yards a carry last year en route to an 800-yard rushing season. He could burst onto the scene this year and have a 1,300-yard campaign because Minnesota with their running backs, they like to row the boat and run the football. So interested to see if he plays. He went for 138 yards in this matchup last year. If he's not there, that gives me less confidence in Minnesota. But if he is there, they bring in Max Brosmer, the transfer from New Hampshire, at quarterback. And there is always a question when you're coming from an FCS program to an FBS, particularly a Power 4 league, and you are playing the quarterback position, there is always a fair question to be asked. How are you going to adjust? How are you going to adapt? Plays are going to happen faster. Guys are bigger. Schemes might be more complex. There's a lot of great coaching at the FCS level. I know that as well as anybody, but certainly there is an adjustment, and game one, not ideal. I'd feel a lot better about Minnesota in this game if they themselves had an FCS opponent week one and it was North Carolina week two. I'd feel supremely confident in Minnesota. Instead, I'm only slightly confident. From a betting line standpoint, if you're looking at placing a wager on this game, I'd stay away. I would stay so far away from this game. I want no part of Minnesota plus 1.5. No part of it. Or North Carolina minus 1.5. I don't want it. Would not recommend it. A 4-point swing, that's just that's stay away. That is stay away territory. So the question in this game is going to come down to that quarterback position, because Brosmer comes in on one side after an experienced and successful career at the FCS level. He's been at New Hampshire for the last few years, over 8,000 yards in his time passing there. He's been quite good. Last year in this game, Minnesota's starting quarterback went for 133 yards and an interception. What if I told you those were not the worst parts of his stat line? It wasn't good. It wasn't good. 11 for 29 passing. 11. I challenge you. I have seen games such as Georgia Tech, Florida State, where a team leans on a run game and doesn't have to throw the ball very often. Give me a game in which a quarterback is 11 for 29, under 150 yards, an interception, no touchdowns, and the team won the game. That's pretty hard. That's pretty hard. So a lot of this falls on Max Brosmer. On the other side, you could be going up against Max Johnson. I think he's going to be a starter. I'm not the biggest Max Johnson fan in the world, but is he capable? Sure. He's fine. But is he Drake May? Is he Sam Howell? No, he's not, which is why I am down on North Carolina this year. I mean, in this matchup a year ago, they leaned on Drake May, 414 yards passing. He had a couple interceptions as well, but I think PJ Fleck at home is going to have enough to get it done. It's going to come down, though, to who gets more out of their quarterback position, whatever that looks like on both sides, because you have a couple of dynamic running backs. Darius Taylor, hopefully he's able to go, and it'll be a great matchup of high-end running backs. If you have that, I expect both ground games to be able to succeed. But what do you get out of the quarterback position? How do you complement that? How do you build off that run game? I don't know. That's what I'm most excited to see in this particular matchup, but also to see if there are any indicators from either of these teams that they're going to show some life, that they're going to have some juice, that they're going to be a team worth watching. The ACC is a much more gettable league than the Big Ten is this year. But PJ Fleck could be coaching to keep himself off of the hot seat. You string together 2 losing seasons in a row after showcasing what you are capable of as a head coach, which is getting Minnesota into a top 15, 20 range throughout the season. And by the time the season comes to a close, you put up a second straight losing season, hot seat talk comes around. You put up a losing season if you're Mack Brown, 72 years old, hot seat talk will come around. The loser of this game, coach doesn't go on the hot seat, but it could start a trend towards moving in that direction where you have to think about as a university, okay, what does our head coach bring to the table? Do we see upward momentum? And whoever wins this game is going to have a step in that direction. Whoever loses it has a step in the other direction, of course. Will it define their seasons? I don't think so. This is the highest stakes game in all of college football. Does that make it uninteresting? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I've got Minnesota winning the game at home. I think 1st to 30 wins, just like last year. 30-24. Gophers over North Carolina. I will feel especially strong if Darius Taylor plays and if Max Brosmer is able to come out, connect with his receiving core, and prove himself capable of playing at the Power 4 level. I think it's one thing when you're a Cam Ward, for instance, who went from Incarnate Word to Washington State. He's at Miami now and could be a Heisman Trophy contender this year. His first year at Washington State, there was an adjustment period. There was a big adjustment period because he hadn't played as much football. But you look at a guy like Max Brosmer, he's played a lot of football. That feels a little bit more like an FCS transfer who you have seen a lot of who makes that adjustment quicker, but it remains to be seen. That's probably the singularly most important question. And I'm putting my prediction hopes here on the shoulders of a guy who has yet to take a snap at the Power 4 level. That's true. On the flip side, though, I know what Max Johnson is at quarterback, and they might have a little bit more of a battle there. But regardless, I've seen Max Johnson play. It's not that inspiring. It's not that impressive. He looks like a left-handed Phillip Rivers, and he's okay. He's fine. Brosmer could be better. Brosmer could be worse. I know what the floor and the ceiling is. I know exactly what Max Johnson is as a quarterback. I don't know what Max Brosmer is right now. So fascinated to see how this game plays out. I've got the Gophers 30-24. But quite frankly, folks, with that betting line movement, Vegas might know something. This is one I could look back later and say, I was so foolish. Why did I doubt Vegas? They moved that line for a reason. It was Minnesota -2.5. Now it's North Carolina -1.5. They've got to have a reason. Maybe they know Darius Taylor is not playing. Maybe Max Brosmer is hurt. I don't know. I have no idea. Those are both speculative remarks on my part, just to say that Vegas knows something. The question is what, and are they right? Because they're a little wrong on that Florida State Georgia Tech game. But this is going to be a really, really fun college football matchup, and I hope everybody enjoys it and understands what it means for both of these head coaches. So, last segment on the show today. I watched the Connor Stalions documentary. Yes, I did. And I have many thoughts. That's coming up next. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you, and it's awesome. It's really awesome. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5. $5. That's it. And get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. How great is that? All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel anytime. Plus, everything you want for college football. If you think I am the smartest guy in the world, you can go put your money where your mouth is on FanDuel, or put your money where my mouth is, I suppose. Or if you think I am dull as can be, you can go fade me at will. By all means. I'm 0-2 on picks to start the year. So if you think that's going to continue, you can go check them out. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's the place to go to download America's #1 sportsbook. This episode also brought to you by Factor. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. That's essential for someone like me who is on the road with the Southern Utah football team, going all over the place to college football games. Having Factor meal preps there, it's really, really helpful. They've got 35 different meals, more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You'll always have new flavors to explore. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50. Use code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code lockedoncollege50 at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Go check out Factor Meals today. All right, so the Connor Stalions documentary, Sign Stealer, came out on Netflix. 2 major takeaways. Number 1, Connor Stalions makes himself look good right up until he very clearly lies to the camera about having been at the Central Michigan game. Did not buy that for one single solitary second. I don't know that anybody did. Takeaway number 2, Michigan's national championship is not tainted. I know there are some big-time college football pundits out there saying that Harbaugh knew and all this sort of stuff, and it's tainted, and it's this, that, and the other thing. I think punishment is plenty warranted. It is clear. Rules were violated. Lines were crossed. But I'll get to that more in just a moment. The biggest takeaway I had was kind of remembering something that we already knew, which is once Connor Stalions was removed from the equation, when he wasn't there, and he's, of course, the guy at the center of all of this. Yeah, Michigan still went out and won the football games. And look, I am glad that college football has allowed the in-helmet communication. If you want to call it the Stallions rule, you may do so. But it's a logical step to address this particular issue so that it doesn't arise again. But here's why I say Michigan's national championship should not be tainted beyond just the fact that he was not there on the sidelines and he was the one going out and doing the in-person scouting, which is against the rules. If punishments come down because of the in-person scouting, that is completely warranted. Stripping the national championship, no, I am not in favor of that. But some sort of punishment, yep, lines were crossed, rules were violated there. But the most jarring aspect of this to me, watching it, was understanding, and I had a passive knowledge of this, but I imagine other people who might have watched it, or if you haven't watched it, this might be something that really crystallizes in your head. Sign stealing is not illegal. It has the word steal in it, so you think it's illegal and wrong and bad. Sign stealing is not illegal. When a runner is out at second base, the catcher historically, until you got the pitch comms, which again, an adjustment from the Houston Astros ordeal, which I think was far more extensive and over the line than what Michigan did here. When you always used to flash 3 numbers or 4 numbers or whatnot. Why? So the guy at second base couldn't look in and see, oh, you put down a 2. And then he signals to the batter, hey, that's a curveball. Stealing signs per the NCAA rules is 100% allowed. Here's what is also allowed. And it was fascinating. The documentary is a great watch. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it because there are a lot of fascinating elements. You hear from Connor Stalions himself. You hear from his family. You hear from his friends, how everything went down. You don't really hear from Jim Harbaugh hardly at all. I have no doubts that Jim Harbaugh knew what was taking place. But is it as egregious of a violation as it appears? No, I do not believe so. Is it a violation? Yes. Is it wildly awful? No. Sign stealing is illegal. You are also allowed to watch the game film of opposing teams, and you are allowed to attempt to decode their signals. You can think that that sounds and feels yucky and gross and not in the spirit of the game, and you should. It is very clear. Everybody's doing this. And here's a word of caution I will put out there to anybody who wants to jump on the moral high horse train about Connor Stalions and Michigan and all this sort of stuff. Be very careful that you don't have to eat your words. Now, many of you out there who would make such remarks are frequently random YouTube commenters or, spam accounts or whatever on Twitter, or burner accounts is the word I was looking for there. So you're not going to be held to that same sort of standard that I might for saying such things. But if you go out there and in your mind say, oh, that's terrible, Michigan did this and we would never do that. You had longtime reporters and pundits in college football saying to a Netflix camera, sign stealing has been a part of the sport for a long time. And guess what? It's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. Everyone's going to be very discreet about it. And now you, of course, have the in-helmet communication. That's better. That is much, much better because it removes an element to allow for such discrepancies to take place. But to say that, Michigan was not going to win the national championship if they didn't have Connor Stalions, you can't make that argument. You cannot make that case for a couple of reasons. Number one, he was on the sidelines since in the 2021 and 22 seasons. Michigan didn't win it all. They were very good, but they did not win it all. Secondly, Joel Klatt had a really good breakdown where he talked about what goes on and the complexities involved with calling a play. It's incredibly, you have to go listen to him. I'm not going to try and duplicate what he said and, everything that goes into understanding the protections, the route combinations. Like, even if a pass is coming, if he looks across and he recognizes a signal because he did his homework, he being Connor Stalions, and he says, "Hey, it's a pass. Hey, it's a pass." What kind of pass? What kind of pass are we talking about here? Like, yes, that's an advantage. There's no doubt about it. But again, the in-person scouting, going to stadiums, dressing up in a Central Michigan outfit, we're crossing a line here. That is too far. Repercussions need to be handed down because that's against the rules. But sign stealing has been around for a long time. And stealing signs in games, you may not like how it makes you feel. That doesn't make it against the rules. That's the fact of the matter. And that was one of my biggest takeaways from it was seeing longtime reporters. I forget who specifically was mentioning it, but it was somebody that was not Connor Stalions who covers college football and was saying, yeah, sign stealing is completely legal. It's allowed. And I kind of sat there and I just kind of sat with that for a minute. I actually paused it and I sat with that for a couple of seconds like, yeah, that's right. There's nothing illegal about looking across and saying, hey, this coach went like that. And this means they're running gap or some, a run concept or whatever. You may not like it. I don't like it if I'm playing my friend or my brother or whoever in EA College Football 25 and we're playing on the same screen and he's looking at my screens to see which of the 3 plays I could be selecting from. But guess what? You got to make adjustments. That's part of the strategy. That's part of coaching. It may not be your favorite part of it, but it is still a part of it, whether you like it or not. So something I'm sure will come down to Michigan, and Connor Stalions was at the center of all of this. And, I think there was an angle that they were trying to approach of like, man, why was Connor the only guy outed? It's like, well, I guess there are other people involved there, so I can see why they would present that particular part of it or that point of view. But only one guy was dressed in a Central Michigan hat. And that was the worst part of the documentary is I thought overall, Connor presented himself very well and just kind of portrayed himself as I'm just someone who loves Michigan and I was doing whatever, I could to help the team. And remember, his first job was actually at Navy, where he was working to decode signals. Like, it's part of college football. That's what you do. And then it got out of hand, got over the line. Did Jim Harbaugh know? Yeah, I suspect he did. Is he ever going to admit that? No, of course not. Is Jim Harbaugh coming back to college football anyway? No, the NCAA has done a good job of running him off for a cheeseburger. Yeah, and I mean, goodness gracious, the NCAA. So I think we'll wrap it all right there. I'm sure none of you will have any thoughts. Definitely don't leave those in the YouTube comments below. Thanks for making this your first listener, first view of the day. Go make Locked On Sports Today your second. Peter Bukowski hosts, giving you the biggest takes in the biggest stories across the sporting universe. That's on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts as well. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.